Hi everybody, I'm Nolan Hoffman. Thanks so much for joining us right here on East Texas in Focus. Let's get started this evening.
Powerful was the blast that it hurled a 1-ton slab of concrete across a driveway and demolished this car.
Well, tonight we are focusing on the New London school explosion, which is still the deadliest school disaster in U.S. history and the third deadliest disaster in Texas history. On March 18, 1937, nearly 300 students and teachers were killed when a natural gas leak believed to have been ignited by a spark from a Sandler in a manual arts class. Of the nearly 700 students in the building during the explosion, only an estimated 130 of them walked away without serious injury. And during one of East Texas's darkest hours, nearly 200 doctors from Dallas quickly came to help, working locals throughout the night in the rain, spending more than 17 hours clearing the site and helping locate survivors. Here is the original press release from 1937.
Death in the daylight comes to the East Texas oil fields. Nearly 500 children perish when an explosion collapses above their heads, the biggest rural high school in the world. It was like this before the explosion, only 10 minutes before the time to go home. These first pictures show what happened then. Without warning, the $1 million building, center for young students for 30 miles around, burst into bits, and under the wreckage were the children. Investigations will determine the cause of the worst school disaster in the history of the United States. The first explanation was that natural gas seeped into the building and blew it to pieces. Through the night, 1,000 grim oil workers tear their hard hands to pull apart the wreckage that holds their children and the children of their neighbors. Under emergency lights from the oil wells, they toil, hoping for the living, expecting to find only the dead. And troops come quickly to lend their help, and in rain and thunder, tractors and trucks work in the mud, aided sometimes by school books thrown under the wheels. This was the force of the blast. From the classrooms, some escaped, but many with injuries of which they died. Shelters in the wreckage saved some when they were blown from their desks. Mute reminders tell the story of their tragedy. The blackboard with its uncompleted problem. The papers on which they worked. The lockers that held their coats and hats. And temporary morgues are established everywhere as parents search for faces they dread to find. And in the rain, the wet that runs down people's cheeks is not all rain. For here is the tragedy of young lives surprised in death. And as the dead are borne away, there is vast sorrow in the people of the land, and there is something more than that, a determination that there must be safety. Surviving children tell their own stories.
And we were studying the life of Edgar Allan Poe, and all of a sudden something went boom, and the roof fell in, and the back end of the building, our floor, fell out. And the blackboard killed Miss Thompson, and there were about 22 in the room, and 5 of us got out. And I grabbed a hold of 2 girls next to me, and I dragged them out. And one of them was dead with a broken back and a broken neck, and the other one had a gash in her forehead. And they rushed the one to Overton and piled the other one up there, and just looked like there was kindling wood out there, sort of rag dolls, just piled up in piles all over.
Somewhere around 3 o'clock, I looked at the clock, and it was when there was a terrific explosion. I feel things pounding down on me, so I had to get under the table. Just as it did, the wall fell on the table. If I hadn't got on the table, I'd have been killed. There was a girl in there that was pinned against the wall in the table, and I pulled her out and took her to one of the teachers was getting out the windows. And then I saw a boy that was buried up in a bunch of derbies, and I pulled the derbies off of him. He couldn't get out nowhere else, just out the windows, and they was crowding out it. We had to pull all the derbies off the stairs, and we got him out, went out there and helped him, pull him out from under all the junk.
And people witnessing this terrifying event say the walls of the school bulged and the roof lifted from the building before ultimately crashing down. And to this day, the New London school explosion is still the deadliest school disaster in our nation's history, collapsing the main wing. The explosion could be heard up to 4 miles away. Within minutes, people in the area began digging through the rubble. Governor James Allred immediately sent the Texas Rangers, Highway Patrol, and the National Guard to help with rescues. Roughnecks from nearby oil fields brought cutting torches and heavy equipment clearing concrete and steel. Buildings in Henderson, Overton, Kilgore, and even Tyler and Longview were converted into first aid tents and morgues to house the enormous number of bodies. Family cars and delivery trucks became hearses and ambulances. Christus Trinity Mother Frances Hospital, which was scheduled to open for the first time ever on March 19th, canceled its opening ceremony, opening immediately one day early to help victims and their families. The tragedy was heard around the world. Eleanor Roosevelt and even Adolf Hitler sent telegrams to East Texas expressing their sympathy for the lives lost. Ultimately, experts from the United States Bureau of Mines determining the connection to the residue gas line was faulty, which allowed the gas to leak into the school. Now, gas at the time was odorless and invisible, allowing the silent killer to go unnoticed. Following this terrible incident, the Texas State Legislature granted the Texas Railroad Commission regulatory authority to adopt and enforce regulation, which led to the adding of the rotten smell we all are familiar with today to natural gas, making leaks quickly detectable by anyone. The legislature immediately held an emergency session enacting the Engineering Registration Act, now known as the Texas Engineering Practice Act, which strictly regulates the practice of engineering due to the faulty installation of the gas line. And to this day, the use of the title engineer is strictly restricted to those who have been professionally certified by the state. Now, over 88 years after the incident, survivors and the community all came together recently to mourn the lives lost. Ashlyn Anderson takes us through the ceremony where she met a 99-year-old woman who survived and recalls the horrific historic event.
The New London School song plays in remembrance of the horrific explosion which happened just feet away 88 years ago.
And I was on the tennis court, and it happened.
99-year-old Betty Daniel Smith was just 11 years old on March 18, 1937. Her heart still heavy, thinking back to that fateful day.
When I walked in the front door, my mother saw that I was upset, and she said, "Betty, what's wrong?" And I said, "The school blew up, Mama."
Taps interrupted the service at 3:17 Tuesday afternoon, the exact time the explosion interrupted and changed the lives of the entire town.
He didn't find Virginia. Virginia was killed.
West Rusk ISD students laid flowers in honor of each student that passed away. Many people sharing their connection to the 294 lives lost.
And my grandpa came up and worked, and he said it was just terrible. You could hear the kids crying and hollering up under the giant slabs, and they couldn't get to them.
Taking this moment to grieve and continue to heal.
It was so impressed on people's mind, you know, that it was just so terrible, you know. People just didn't want to mention it or think about it.
Even though it's a painful memory to relive,
My friends have always been there.
but always remembering those names every year helps keep their memory alive.
All right, when we return right here with East Texas in Focus, more with Betty Daniel Smith as she goes into greater detail recalling her traumatic experience. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We're focusing on the New London school explosion this evening. It's one of the deadliest moments in East Texas history, killing nearly 300 students and teachers on March 17, 1937. A natural gas explosion instantly destroying the building and ending hundreds of lives in one of the most devastating disasters in our state's history. And one of the people we heard from in Ashlyn's piece was Miss Betty Smith. She was in the 7th grade when the blast happened. happened. She was saved because 11-year-old Betty at the time was outside on the tennis courts. Now, this is her retelling of that tragic day.
I went to school as normal, rode the school bus, and we had a regular day, and we were getting ready for county meet, like UIL now. We were getting ready for county meet the next day, and I was on the tennis court. And it happened. I don't know how I got home. I don't know if I rode the bus home or somebody picked me up and took me home. But when I walked in the front door, my mother saw that I was upset, and she said, "Betty, what's wrong?" And I said, "The school blew up, Mama." And she said, "What?" I said, "The school blew up." And undoubtedly, I must have been a fibber, because she said, "Betty, don't say things like that." And I said, "It did." And she said, "Well, we've got to find your daddy then." My dad worked over here on the other side of the school at the Humble Oil and Refining Company. And she put me in the car, and we came from Turnertown up here to the corner, and they'd already stopped traffic up there, so we had to walk down here. And when we got here, they were already bringing bodies out. And my back door neighbor saw me, and he ran up to me and said, "Have you seen Virginia?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I found Mary Jo, and I couldn't get her to stay where I could keep up with her, so I belted her to the tree out here so she couldn't get away from me, and I'm going to go look for Virginia." He didn't find Virginia. Virginia was killed. In the next few days, we did nothing but go to funerals. And my dad helped clearing everything up, and he didn't know for over 24 hours whether I was dead or alive. I graduated here in 1941. So we had a normal school year, I guess. After that, I played in the band and rooted for the football team. And we just had such good relationships. We were a family. And after that, I always looked. I wouldn't come for several years. I didn't think I could come for several years. And one of my friends told me her sister was killed. And she said, "You're going this year. If you don't come, I'm going to come and get you." So I decided I'd better come, or she'd go come and get me. And I haven't missed but one since then.
All right, when we return, we'll hear from another man who remembers this historic event here in our state and how he is helping to honor the lives lost as he breaks down the impact here in East Texas. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back this evening. We're focusing on the New London school explosion. 88 years ago, nearly 300 students and teachers were killed when natural gas leaked into the school, sparking a massive explosion heard 4 miles away. Now, the London Museum and Cafe on Highway 42, located directly across from West Rusk High School, formerly known as the rebuilt London High School, is dedicated to this fateful day in our state's history. We recently spoke to one of the museum's board members who tells us why this museum is so important to our community.
The cenotaph across the street is dedicated to the 293 students and teachers that were lost in an explosion in 1937 at 3:17 in the afternoon. You know, it's well worthwhile to remember all these that were lost in that explosion. Because you take almost 300 people out of a small community like this, you can imagine what it does to the families. Everybody was connected some way, a friend, a loved one, or, you know, children, teachers. It was just devastating. And it still stands as the worst school disaster in the United States. The community, for a while, we didn't really have anything like this, but this has brought the community together and people in the surrounding area, making them aware. You'd be surprised how many people have lived here all their life and they've never heard of the school explosion. I had family that was in the explosion. My dad's oldest brother was in the library on the second floor doing a book report, and he was late getting to the shop, and the shop is where supposedly they flipped a switch and an electric spark blew up the school. But he jumped out the window and ran, and most of the other brothers were in younger grades, and thank goodness nobody was hurt, and they all ran home, which was about 5 miles from here. But it was really sad. My grandpa came up and worked, and he said it was just terrible. You could hear the kids crying and hollering up under the giant slabs, and they couldn't get to them. And really back then, about the only thing they had was oil field equipment, and the oil field contributed quite a bit to helping with it, whatever needed to be done. And it was just an awful time in this community, and it took a lot of healing, and some people never got over it. You know, I know one guy, his little boy had been complaining of headaches because of the gas, and supposedly he made him go to school that day, and he got killed, and he never got over it. It ruined his life. And there's so many stories like that. I mean, it's something you don't want to dwell on, but you just think about what all those people went through. You know, some people lost 3 kids, and that might have been all their kids. It just, like I said a while ago, it touched everybody in some way. Because you take little communities like this, and they're close-knit, and it's just, when you take that many people, teachers and kids out of a community, there's not much left, and that affected the future after that, you know. And like they said out there at the memorial service today, there were a lot of people that sent telegrams, because this went worldwide. Back then, stuff just didn't make it worldwide that often, and President Roosevelt and even Adolf Hitler and President Roosevelt's wife sent telegrams, and there were just, I think there were a few more, but I can't remember which ones they were, but it was worldwide known. Most people probably don't know it, but natural gas didn't have an odor back before 1937, and after that the legislature passed, it was a very fast deal, but they sent a bill through that all natural gas had to have the odor in it, and this saved countless lives since then, so it was really a good thing. And back then, natural gas was, there was no market for it, because it was just a byproduct of the oil industry, drilling and so forth. So that's what our school was heated with, was natural gas. And after the explosion, they converted to steam, so it didn't have any more natural gas. People back before 1977, people just didn't talk about it. And some guys, I can't remember their names, but they got together and said, what do you think about having a reunion? And so along there somewhere, 77, 78, I believe, they had the first reunion, and people started opening up and sharing their memories and talking about it. And that helped a lot, and it's helped a lot since then. But because it was just, I remember my grandmother, she had a whole scrapbook. I have the scrapbook now. But we just didn't talk about it, you know. It was so impressed on people's mind, you know, that it was just so terrible, you know. People just didn't want to mention it or think about it. I would encourage people to come see this museum. I think they'll be shocked when they come to see the caliber of how well it's done. We had a guy that was professional. He did this, I guess, for a living, and he helped a lot with the layout, the mosaics on the wall and stuff. And the museum is just, it speaks for itself, and just so much to see. You can't see it in an hour or hour and a half. You might as well take, depending on, you know, it's going to take you 3 hours probably to see all of it. If you more than that probably if you read all the stuff.
And the museum was originally hosted by Molly Ward. She was a survivor of the explosion who later served as mayor of New London in 2015. All right, coming up after this quick break, we'll have much more on the legacy of this historic day in East Texas history. We'll be right back. Welcome back this evening. We've been covering and talking about the New London school explosion, which killed nearly 300 students and teachers in 1937. Now, the incident slipped through the cracks for several decades, as many survivors say they were afraid to talk about it, given the emotional impact it had on their immediate families and friends. But since the early 1970s, it's been retaking its place in the public eye. Texas filmmaker Michael Brown producing a half-hour documentary, and then in 1987, Jerry Gumbard also commemorating the event. Finally, in the early 2000s, East Texas native Kristen Beauchamp shares the stories of some of the last living survivors. The movie released in 2009 and is titled When Even Angels Wept. And next week, we'll zero in on more issues here in East Texas. That is all happening this coming Saturday right here on East Texas in Focus after Fox 51 News at 9. Have a great night, everybody.